Good evening. Good evening. Welcome to the September 9th Planning and Development Committee. We have a quorum. So is this right otherwise? Okay, thank you. May I have a motion for approval of the regular meeting minutes of July 22nd, 2019? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Items for consideration, we have P1, Tenant-Based Rental Assistance Program Report. The Housing and Homelessness Commission and staff recommend approval of a funding renewal of $300,000 in home funds to continue the current tenant-based rental assistance program administered by Connections for the Homeless. The funding will provide stable housing for 2 years, up to 10 at-risk Evanston families with children under the age of 18 in Evanston that are underemployed, and break the cycle of poverty and instability by developing the capacity to earn a living wage to support their families and afford market rate rental housing. Funding is from the Home Investment Partnership Program. Currently, the city has a total of $464,317. This is for action. See if we have a...
Move approval. Second.
Thank you. See if we have a public comment. We have 2 public comments. Ms. Tina Payton. Is Ms. Hey, Ms. Payton. Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Tina Payton. I just wanted to support the TBER program, and I do have available units if you're available for me.
Thank you, Ms. Payton. And we have Ms. Betty Esther.
Good evening. We have this program, and right now we're finna give $300,000 to help families to stay in their homes and stuff, which is a good thing. But with the Home Funds program and any government program, we need to have feedback as to how many families was successful in getting out of this program and staying. If it comes to the 2 years and they haven't gotten on their feet, or they pushed out, we don't know that. We don't have no kind of report. I would like to know how many currently are in 1 year and how many currently in 2 years. If we're spending the money, I would like to see the results. Those are my tax dollars. Now, the remaining money that is left in the home fund, will that be geared towards affordable housing? And I have seen nothing in the allocation and everything of you giving money to the CHODOs. We still have CHODOs in this town that we are supposed to be supporting them with administrative funds and stuff if they need that. That's not something you have done before, but I think that you should give them that fund to help them, whether they ask or not. It should be a gift because they have been working hard and staying with the programs. So with money being tight in from grants and things, so money that comes to the city through this home program, some of it should be allocated to the CHODOs for their administrative service work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Esther. All in favor of P1?
Well, could we have some discussion?
Oh, sure. I didn't see any lights. Oh, I'm sorry, yours was Heidi.
Yes, I think those were superb questions, and those were questions I used to have. But I think Connections has done a really great job following up and making sure that we knew what kind of outcomes they were having. And I think since I think Sue is here tonight, and while she's sort of an overall type person, there is a paragraph right in the cover letter that we have here that answers every single one of Betty Sue Esther's questions. She's challenged Connections, and somebody from Connections or somebody who follows them should come up to the microphone and respond, because we're not able to do that. So could we ask somebody to come up? Not only for, no, not one of our staff, I don't think. Oh, okay. Somebody from Connections, because the audience is sitting here thinking, yeah, those are my tax dollars too. What are the answers to those questions? Tell us.
Sure. Good evening, City Council. My name is Nia Tavalaris. I'm the Director of Development at Connections for the Homeless. I'm here with my colleague, Jennifer Foyer-Crystal. She's the Director of our housing programs. And so the TIBRA program is one of the housing programs that she and her team administer. And she's just going to share a little bit about some of the results regarding answering some of the questions that Ms. Esther asked.
Hello, Council, and thank you, Ms. Esther, for the wonderful questions. So we do report back to the city all of our outcomes each year when we're renewing our grant. So in this year's renewal, we shared that 10 of the families that exited this past program year, 100% exited to permanent housing, that they were able to sustain past their grant subsidy. 85% of the families either started a job or maintained a job that pays a living wage throughout the year, their last year in the program. 46% of families served last year increased their income, and 98% of the children served achieved strong academic outcomes and advanced to the next grade level, which is a huge piece of the TIBRA program, is actually children not having to leave their schools because of homelessness or housing insecurity. So that's one of the outcomes I'm most proud of for the program. And Ms. Esther's also asked about how many people leave after the first year. We sometimes will have one person leave, one household leave, but it's rare. They usually stay below the AMI that they need to be at for the program through the second year, and we do let them keep their subsidy throughout that year. But if we're seeing they're paying a large portion of the rent, that does leave dollars left that sometimes we can add another family in. But we're recalculating rent constantly as income changes and as income increases to make sure they're paying the maximum amount of rent they can pay while they're in the program. And if they surpass the 80% AMI, then they are no longer eligible, and they would then be off the program because they can afford their rent.
Good news.
Alderman Ravel?
And there was also the question about what happens at the end of their year if they're not ready to leave the program?
Sure. So this year we did not do any extensions because our grant we were at the end of the grant. So by and large, families are ready at the end. We do sometimes hit a patch, like we've had a person lose a job like 2 months before they were done and they're starting a new job. Sometimes we can help them with another funding source a couple extra months, but nothing long-term like TIBRA. And we continue to do aftercare case management for at least 6 months, but we will continue for even longer if they continue to need services.
And just as a final thought, Alderman, Connections really values this relationship with the city, and we're really honored to be able to partner with the city and to really be the program that applies the funding. Home funds come from the federal government through the city of Evanston. We go out to Connections. We go out and leverage other resources, around $100,000 of giving from individual donors, from the state of Illinois, from private foundations to administer this program on behalf of the city. So we're really proud of this partnership and appreciate the community's interest and engagement in it, and are happy to answer any questions at any time about it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for being here. May I have a second? Wait. Motion passes. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay. P2, staff recommends city council adoption of resolution 74R19, approving the proposed re-subdivision of the property located at 1211 through 1217 Ridge Avenue. It's for action. We have just one speaker. We have Pat Kirsten Coleman.
Hi there, my name is Kirsten Coleman. I'm the owner of 1217 1211 Ridge Avenue. I'm here with my husband as well. And it's our understanding that tonight we just needed to clarify one aspect of our plan. We do have a brick circular driveway in front of our home. It bridges the two lots. It is original to the home. It's brick. I do have photos if that's of interest. And on our survey, we did not have specific enough language as to the easement we're requesting. Living on Ridge Avenue, it's a very busy street. We feel that having forward-facing access to the street is a huge asset to us. We have young children, and it's just nice to go through. We also, for the purpose of receiving deliveries, it's nice to have the ability for contractors, so forth, to pull in safely off Ridge Avenue, not be flashing on Ridge Avenue because it is such a narrow and busy street. So what we did bring tonight is language that we intend to add to our survey that describes the easement and ownership responsibilities. I apologize, I wasn't aware or I wasn't sure of the nature of this, so I did print hard copies. I have 5 copies I am happy to distribute. May I?
Yes. Would you share it with you could just read the statement. Mhm.
Sure. Oh, I'm sorry, I gave away all my copies. Each owner hereby grants and conveys to the other owner a non-exclusive easement for vehicular and pedestrian ingress and egress over and across the platted area defined herein as the access easement to the owners of record from time to time of Lot 1 and 2 and their respective contractors, employees, guests, and invitees. Owners of Lot 1 or 2 are required to permit and provide passage across the easement and are required to maintain the portion of the access easement that falls within their ownership parcel. And I do have additional documents, if that would be helpful, showing the site plan that we presented during the preservation meeting, or anything else.
Is there any discussion?
No, I think,
Yes.
So I'm very familiar with the property and from the street. And I do agree that having this type of arrangement is probably going to be the most safe setup for not just yourselves, but also for the operation of the street. So I would move that we approve the request.
Do we need to?
I don't, so let me go back and look at the, hold on, let me see if we need to change the resolution. So council, do we need to wrap that?
I think you could add to section 2, just add a subsection D to indicate that the applicant must record this amended language
Okay.
With their subdivision.
Okay, so I move that so my first motion is that we amend the resolution to add section 2, subsection D, requiring the applicant to record the easement agreement with regard to both parcels.
Second.
Okay, it's been properly moved in second.
So if we can approve the amendment.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
And then I would move that we approve the amended resolution.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
P3, we don't have any public comment. Staff recommends adoption of ordinance 104-019 to extend the time for completion of the plan development at 318 through 320 Dempster Street, originally approved in March of 2008. The ordinance grants a one-year extension to obtain building permits for construction of the third dwelling unit within the former livery stable of the property by September 25th, 2020. Alderman Melissa Nguyen recommends suspension of the rules for introduction action at the September 9th, 2019 City Council meetings for introduction and action. Move approval. Okay. Alderman Nguyen?
I just wanted to comment that this has been a long time, but it is a unique property, and this is an opportunity. And there have been a number of things, bumps along the way, including the recession and some other issues regarding the owners. But this is now very close to becoming a reality. There is a new buyer who is an Evanstonian who's very interested in the project. This to me is an excellent example of readaptive use of a structure that once had a very important use here in Evanston on Dempster Street as a livery stable, but now can become a dwelling unit. And so I would urge my council members to support this, and we'll get this done. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? It's been properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Items for discussion, we have PD1, and we have two speakers. Ms. Leslie Shad. Good evening.
Evening. I'm Leslie Shad. I'm a resident of Evanston and co-lead of Natural Habitat Evanston. I'm very brief. I just have emailed to each member of the committee a petition from 260 people in support of the Heritage Tree Ordinance. I so much appreciate bringing this to the committee discussion, and it's important for all the reasons that the Dr. Westwood from Morton Arboretum mentioned. So I'm just going to leave it at that, and I just brought 2 copies since I emailed it. So should I give you?
I'll leave one with the clerk. We have it, though.
Yes.
Thank you, Leslie. May we have Deborah Raisin?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in support of this discussion item. When I moved to Evanston 4 years ago, I was told by the real estate agent that this is, among other things, the city of trees. And I think that's still true, although a lot of them have unfortunately died due to elm disease and other things. And so I think when we have real heritage trees, it's something that we should be really proud of in this city. It draws people like me to come here. And I would really support the council looking at this as something to look at. So thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Paul, could you join us and give us some background on this, please? Thank you for being here.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. The existing tree preservation ordinance that's already on the books as stated in the memo, really only covers public trees, trees that are affected by planned developments or subdivisions of 2 acres or larger. Over the past 2 years, we've issued probably a little over almost 250 tree preservation permits for various projects, most of which just involve parkway excavations for plumbing repairs or sprinklers or that type of thing, cable installations. There haven't been a lot of projects that have come under the purview of this ordinance. I know tonight's discussion is more about trees on private property. Defining a heritage tree can be very subjective or it can be very objective, depending on which way the committee and or the council wants to go. You could limit it to sizes and species. You could limit it to certain parts of town. You could do any number of things. So I don't have a whole lot more to add to it than that, other than if you have a certain direction you'd like to go.
Alderman Fisk.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Paul. So let's look at being the most objective. I mean, if we're looking at trees on our list of preferred replacement trees for the parkway, that's a fairly long list.
Yes, it is.
But I think when people think of Evanston, we think in terms of the oak trees that were here originally.
Yes.
Why we all have oak floors in our vintage houses, and the elm trees, which unfortunately are a challenge and continuing to be a challenge. So I guess my thought is, in terms of size and canopy and type of tree, species of tree, that would be a really good place to start. Can you talk a little bit about the Preservation Commission and, or maybe maybe Corporation Council can address why it wasn't chosen to amend the Preservation Commission to include trees. They include landscape masses, but landscape masses as a definition apparently does not include trees. That's my understanding. That's my understanding. Okay, well, I don't want to put anyone on the...
Could you repeat the question?
Okay, my question was, why couldn't we have included this under the preservation ordinance for their review when they're looking at landmark properties and historic districts? Because they do have landscape masses, but those landscape masses unfortunately do not include trees. And a number of us in our wards have had challenges with developments where obviously very old and historic trees have come down or been threatened.
Good evening, Michelle Mason, City Attorney. I can't really speak for the Preservation Commission and why they did or didn't include this in their ordinance.
So I'm going to ask Scott, I understand you were at the commission. Can you give us some background on heritage trees as it relates to the Preservation Commission?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. So the Preservation Commission did discuss this issue. Some of their thoughts are included in the packet, but in summary, they felt it was a very important issue. Trees preservation is very important to the character of Evanston community and many of the historic neighborhoods. But for a couple reasons, they felt that it was better served to be located within the current location of the city code. One is that the preservation ordinance only deals with historic districts, which are certain areas of the city, or landmarks, so specific properties. And this is really a citywide issue. This should be covered in the city code citywide. And then additionally, they felt they lacked the expertise in tree preservation, and there are no arborists on the Preservation Commission. They're a collection of architects, realtors, attorneys, various professions, but do not have that expertise. So that was their input in the process.
Thank you. Was that fine, Alderman Fisk?
I was aware of that because I was watching, so but I wanted that to be part of the record here so that people would understand that. I mean, interestingly enough, while that would seem to work on the Kendall property when it was subdivided, there were trees protected on the property. It was a subdivision of it was planned development, not a planned development, but a subdivision over 2 acres. And then there were trees on private property that were identified as needing to be preserved, and they, unfortunately, due to the placement of houses, they were not given the priority that they should have had, and unfortunately came down. So I guess what I'm looking for is a way to say that these large trees, these 200, 300-year-old trees do matter in our community. They add character to our community. They add shade. They clean our air. They've been here long before any people were here. And I think it's really is time to make them a part of our protected community of streetscape and character of neighborhoods. So that was the impetus behind making this a priority. I think at least 3 of us, though, have had these issues come up in our ward recently. They have not ended up well, and have created a lot of sadness, I guess is the right word. So if we can look at types of trees, Paul, that are the most likely to fall into a category of a certain age, and I'm not sure where we draw that age, whether it's 100 years and above, or I guess I'd ask the committee to give us, or give me some sense of what you would think a heritage tree would be. That would be helpful. So this is really starting out the process of how we protect these living plants that give so much to us.
Yes, thank you, Alderman Fisk. I agree and support that this should be extended beyond just preservation in historic districts. The trees in our community certainly are an environmental asset. They are an aesthetic beauty. They're an amenity that just cannot be replaced. So I'm in support of continuing this discussion. We had Alderman Nguyen, then Alderman Rowe, and Alderman Rainey next.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am in support of a heritage tree ordinance very much, and I agree that it should cover the entire city. I do think that that we should have an objective standard, so that as opposed to a subjective standard. I think some of the materials that we received, I believe about a couple of the other cities that were listed here, describe a couple of good ideas. I would tend towards, I think it was Menlo Park, which listed a series of species to be protected, and one of the things that they did say was all oaks native to California, and then they did various measurements for the diameter of the tree at particular heights. So that would be an indication. I've done some other research on age of trees that would be an indication of the age of the tree, so that whatever, at 40 inches of height, a tree that has particular diameter would become a protected tree. So I think having some type of objective standard like that would be a good one. I'd like to hear back from the Forestry Department about the species list and what their recommendations would be about how we could come up with an objective standard. And then I do think that we should move forward and protect these trees because they really benefit all of us. Like Alderman Fisk mentioned, I've had a concern about a very large tree that was taken down in my ward. So I think that it's really critical that we should look at these. They are part of our infrastructure, just a natural part of our infrastructure, and they're critically important to the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Ravel?
Well, I agree with everyone's comments thus far. I think in addition to the age of a tree, though, I think looking at the size of the tree would be another important objective measure. I think our current tree ordinance talks about trees of a fairly small diameter. So I guess when I was looking at some of these other ordinances in other communities, they were talking about DBHs of much larger size. So because I think if we're going to be asking private property owners to protect their trees, and if we're going to, for example, require them to get a permit to remove a tree, we need to be reasonable in what we are, in the kinds of trees that we're trying to save. So, and making it objective, the species to be saved, an age of a tree, and then a tree of a reasonable size. And it occurred to me that asking private property owners to go through a permit process to be able to remove a tree gives us an opportunity then to have a conversation with the property owner to educate them about the importance of the tree. Obviously, if it's diseased or dying, then they should, of course, be able to take it down. But if we can encourage them to make changes to, for example, a planned addition to the home in order to save a tree, I think that would be a very productive conversation to be able to have with people.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
Well, I'm still in favor of a tree preservation ordinance, but I don't see the need for us to call it a heritage tree ordinance. I think we can do a fine job by calling it a preservation ordinance. I happen to have a case in my ward where a family is suffering terribly because of a very large, gorgeous tree that is causing their sewer line to be so totally destroyed, and it's going to cost them tens of thousands of dollars to have the sewer line moved. And the tree is going, if the tree is going to remain, the sewer line has to be moved. And the city says it's nothing they can do about it, it is their problem, it is their line, etc. And in this case, the sewer line does not run out to the street, it runs all the way down the block to the next corner because it's a long story and that's how it happened to be constructed. So I think there's a lot of different circumstances here, but I think calling it a heritage tree ordinance causes all sorts of implications that I think we should not deal with. And as Alderman Fisk said in her opening remarks, I don't know how many years or how big the trunk should be. And so it just causes all sorts of, different opinions about what is a heritage tree. And if Paul D'Agostino can't tell us in, 10 words or less what a heritage tree is, then I don't think we're the people to decide what a heritage tree is. So that's my opinion.
Yeah, so I'm not the heritage piece, I'm not that educated on, but trees in the respect of what they do for our quality of life, they reduce stress and lower blood pressure, improve moods, and it's something that we should look at really as an asset, just even from a health perspective and overall, but not really educated on what the heritage piece does and how that will limit or complicate the ordinance further. Alderman Fisk.
Well, I think that's something that we can look at and ask staff to give us an opinion on based on what other communities do. And I think that's fine to do that. As with almost all of our ordinances, there is an opportunity for a homeowner to appeal. This isn't just a do or die. This is the homeowner certainly can come to the city and say, in the case of Alderman Rainey's resident, that there's no option for them other than to take the tree down. I guess I would ask our public works staff, having just gone through an issue with my sewer and trees, I would ask our public works staff just to comment. I'm real interested in whether once a tree is cut down, the roots continue to grow, because you see them, see them sprouting up again. So it's not taking the tree down is not necessarily the answer to that. Regular maintenance might be an answer to that. So I don't know.
That is the problem.
Alderman Fisk, the answer to that question depends on the species of the tree. Most will stop growing. There are a few that continue to grow for 1 to 2 years, trying to regenerate themselves, but in general they'll die as soon as the tree is cut down.
How often do you recommend? Do you know what they recommend in terms of rotting out sewers to keep tree roots out of sewers? Do you have any idea?
I do not know that.
Okay.
This is beyond that.
Alderman Rainey, was this an old light or you had another
No, it's a
comment?
new light.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted you to know, Alderman Simmons, that I was probably the first alderman to introduce a tree preservation ordinance, for which I got absolutely no support on the council many years ago. However, from around the country, I got lots of support, just so you know.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. I wasn't on the council at that
know.
time, but
Paul DiAgostino was here then, and he knows that I did, and got
Alderman
no-
Rainey, I was on the
no
council,
support.
and I apologize for my ignorance.
Okay. Well, it's not ignorance, it just wasn't being done then.
well, we're all learning. My favorite current pastime is forest bathing, and it's a luxury to be able to do it right here in Evanston. So I'd like to be able to continue. Is there any?
Chair Rusin, if I can just get a clarification. So are you looking for staff? What I'm hearing is that you want us to come back with an ordinance that would create like a group D, where it's protected trees and it's very large diameter and very old. And we would have provisions regarding old trees. Is that what you
See,
want
I don't
from
know
staff?
that I would want to limit it to diameter, because
Okay.
you could have a very old or important tree that's not stout. So I'm not yet educated enough.
Okay, we will come back with more information.
Okay.
If I could add that it looks like there are other communities that have identified a species list, and then it's based on the species list, a size of a tree that meets a protection threshold. And then I want to just clarify, is there a desire to further understand what a heritage or landmark tree is, or is that something that at this time we do not want to have staff pursue?
I think we should get more educated on it before we completely dismiss it. But I just don't want it to limit us in too many ways. So
When we can return with additional information for discussion.
thank you. And we have for communications, PC1, and we have one public comment, and then we'll have a presentation. So the public comment is David Galloway. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is David Galloway, as you know. Excuse me, I'm suffering a slight cold. I am Vice President of Design Evanston, and I'm pleased to be here to address you in regards to the charrette that we had as it relates to what we call the LPL, the library parking lot site. I originally intended to be here to simply answer your questions of the position paper that we generated, but I've received a number of comments from fellow members that have suggested that I at least give a brief summation of what our final product was for those that have yet to see the document and for the public that is here tonight. So if you would grant me a few minutes, I'll do my very best to edit the document that you've all received.
1 second. So are you and Jack Weiss together on this, or?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Because I had communicated and allowed for a little bit extra time for your presentation.
Okay.
So it's granted.
Okay. Thank you very much. First off, I should perhaps define what a charrette is. In the architectural parlance, that is a gathering of designers, typically, to address a certain design problem. And it usually starts out with an analysis of the context, and then proceeds to move into design concepts and schematics. In some instances, a final design is sometimes generated, but moreover, given a limited amount of time, such as like 3.5 hours for this, it usually results in the presentation of concepts, goals, or schematics. And so, we had a gathering of around 20 people, all design professionals, members of Design Evanston. And to start out the process, we needed to become better familiar with the context and the challenges of the site. So we had a presentation of a timeline history of the site and its adjacent neighbors, the WCTU and the Women's Club building, a review of photographs of the site and its environs, an analysis of the zoning, a review of the proposal for this site that was included in the 2009 downtown plan, a review of the recent history of the RFP process for the site, and a review of recent proposals for the site. And we also reviewed, in a very brief way, some upcoming major projects in the neighborhood of the site, such as the office building at 601 Davis and the residential building at 1621 to 1631 Chicago Avenue. Subsequently to that, the participants were broken into 3 groups, 6 to 8 people, and they were given a list of items that they should consider in their deliberations for what might happen on the site. These items included financial ramifications, the zoning, taking into account its historic neighbors, whether the development should be private or public, the best use of the site, transportation issues as it relates to anything a good transportation-oriented development city should take into consideration, the height, massing, and open space, how any solution might affect the street level, and what would residents of Evanston in 10, 20, or 30 years think of anything that we might propose for that site. So at the end of this process, the sharing, coalescing, and editing of each table's responses resulted in the following. The first was, well, what should we do right now? And unanimously, to a person, everyone agreed, don't do anything right now. There are a number of circumstances that are unique and are occurring at this present time that, in our opinion, would affect a quality approach to this design problem. The first is the reassessment of property in Evanston, and the 2 significant developments that are presently under review, 601 Davis and 1231 Chicago Avenue. And since we wrote this, there is yet another development, and that is that the city of Evanston is looking for a new city manager. So, given all of that, we felt that the implementation and what occurs from all of these situations and projects would have a significant effect on how the development of this site should be approached. And all those other developments were significantly of greater scale and prominence than this relatively meager site. And this relatively meager site is also in a far more sensitive historical context than the other projects. Revenue. Generally, we felt that the city should focus more on long-term revenue for this site as opposed to any upfront revenue. We felt that the quest to seek upfront revenue on this site was a deterrent to reaching a quality solution. Siting of the development. We felt that this was a very unique site, particularly given the history of Evanston and the influence that women have had in the formation of both Evanston and our culture. Between the sites located between the Women's Christian Temperance Union campus and the Women's Club of Evanston. And we felt that that was an extremely sensitive and significant aspect that should be considered. Zoning. We were not so concerned with what would happen on the site as it relates to zoning as we were to what the quality of the project would be. And in our opinion, the zoning or what use any development might take would be determinant upon the market conditions at the time. And so we're not concerned whether something there would be a residential building or an office tower or whatever. We were more concerned that whatever occurred there would be of high quality and, of course, respond to present market conditions. Parking accommodations. We all know that the present site is a parking lot, and based upon all of our chance encounters and visits to the parking lot, we felt that probably 60 to 70% of the spaces presently there would probably need to be accommodated in any future development. Given what we observed and given the trends in reduced automobile usage. Parking is also expensive to incorporate into any building. And parking spaces in any building use space that could far more laudably be used for other uses.
Okay, 30 more seconds so we can allow for some discussion.
We felt that the women's history aspect of the site was a strong influencer as to what type of development might be pursued there. And while some people reflected back to a underground garage and park that was part of the 2009 downtown plan, most felt that that was financially infeasible, and that any development of the building there should be sensitive to the two adjacent properties and attempt to create a green space or park-like setting in the front that would link the sites, and then the building would then sit back from that, and then all the services and any parking would be located at the rear of the building. And we were not that concerned about the height of the building, given the fact that it would be set back so far, and that the tree cover and the park in the front would add the pedestrian scale that we felt was so important, and that might tie all of these sites together into perhaps a future campus, as it might relate to women's issues.
Thank you, David. Is there any discussion? Alderman Ravel.
Well, I just like to express my appreciation to Design Evanston for putting, devoting an evening to giving us the benefit of your expertise, and I really appreciate your report and your recommendations.
Thank you very much for putting that time in. Appreciate it.
If you have any questions, Jack or I are here to answer them.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
For your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Mhm. All right, my motion to adjourn. Okay, we are adjourned. City Council will start at 8 o'clock.